Why accounting makes sense in class, but not at home. One reason is that there are many very good accounting instructors that present the information clearly, confidently, and correctly. So as we see the information being drawn up on the board, as we see problems being worked through, it makes perfect sense, it is correct, and it's presented clearly. However, what we do not see with that clear information is what's going on. What are the resources that are being drawn upon by the instructor? What is in their head other than what is on the board? And that's going to be a knowledge and a visualization of the concepts of accounting, how the game is played, what the normal balances are. They have a visualization of that. They have a visualization of what the financial statements look like. They have a visualization, in essence, of a trial balance. So as we enter information on the board, we're severely limited by the fact that we're using a whiteboard, and therefore the scope of the information will be severely limited. We'll be able only to concentrate on one specific thing, one specific component, zooming into one specific angle using a whiteboard. And therefore we'll see things such as the accounting equation, just representing information in terms of the accounting equation, saying something like the assets will go up, the liabilities will go up, the equity will go up or down, and seeing these transactions just in terms of the accounting equation, which means we don't really even see the accounts in that format. That's one way that we can simplify the information, get some concept of it, but it's also pulling out or restricting a lot of other information. Good tool, but not the only tool that we're going to need. We also get things like journal entries on the board that aren't really connected to anything. We'll just write out the journal entry and kind of explain the debits and credits of the journal entries. And of course, the instructor has in their mind exactly all the rules for the debits and credits. They know the normal balance of these two accounts. They know what these accounts will be doing. They know what the effect on the trial balance will be and the effect on the financial statements, the effect on net income. All of that is in their head. But of course, as learners, this information is basically just a journal entry that's floating on the board. It's not connected to anything. We don't have all that visualization in our head when we're learning this information, and therefore just a journal entry on the board is often not enough for us to really pick up that information, although it will make sense as it is presented clearly as we draw the journal entry and explain what the normal balances are, but we can't really visualize it as we could if we could see that journal entry posted to something, say a general ledger or a trial balance. And we also might see things just like tables kind of floating around in the table. We'll say, this is what you do in step 1 and step 2. We'll create the table. But then we also want to know, how do those tables really relate to the financial statements as well? How do they relate to debits and credits versus a table? We're severely limited when we have just a whiteboard and we're entering this information in. We can put it in the form of a table. We can put it in the form of debits and credits. We usually cannot post it. We may use things like T accounts in order to see some partial accounts, but even then we can't really see the T accounts and how they tie in to the entire trial balance when we're working with something like a whiteboard. It can be compared to us trying to learn something like chess by having someone explain a particular move of a particular piece without us being able to visualize the board on which that move would take place and the rules by which that piece would move. We need to be able to visualize the board before someone telling us how a particular piece would move would make sense. Now, if we had in our head, we knew where all the pieces were going to be set up, we've played the game enough to know where everything is set up, then we can easily visualize that. And if someone was just to tell us we're going to move this piece from here to there, we can visualize that in our head. We may not even need the board. But for a great deal of time, we will need the board, and it's just a matter of practice before we'll be able to, at some point, visualize the board. So until that happens, what we want to do is practice as much as possible with the board. In our case, that board is the trial balance. We want to be able to use the trial balance, to see the trial balance, to work with the trial balance as much as possible. Whenever we see journal entries that are just floating around and they're not connected to any GL, they're not posted, they're not going to a trial balance, we want to go to a trial balance and take a look at it, even if it's not the same trial balance that we are working with regard to that journal entry, to give us some idea of the board, the concept, how things are set up, and then we can get some idea of what that journal entry will do with regards to the components of the trial balance and therefore with regards to the financial statements. It's even better to work more comprehensive problems that actually work with a trial balance so we don't have floating journal entries. One way to do this is to work more comprehensive problems. More comprehensive problems can actually be easier in some ways because they allow us to see the end result. Shorter problems will often try to shorten the problem by cutting out the trial balance. The trial balance, which is the very thing that we need to actually visualize. If we work more comprehensive problems, then more often we get to post to the trial balance and see the effect on the trial balance. For example, if we had a problem such as this is a longer liquidation type problem of a partnership, a bit more of an advanced type problem, but oftentimes we will see this problem presented in the format of a table. So we'll see the problem presented in the format of a table because if we put that on a whiteboard, that's one easy way for us to do this. We can present this in that format. However, we want to be able to visualize it in terms of journal entries as well. And if you have a longer type of problem and you think through the same information, with regards to a journal entry, posting those journal entries and a trial balance and seeing the effect of the trial balance, seeing the liquidation, the closing of a partnership, journal entry by journal entry, step by step, and seeing how the balances are here, and then we adjust them, seeing how these accounts will then be used to affect the trial balance on each step of the way. That's really how we get a full understanding of not only the table concept in terms of the step-by-step processes, what do you do in step 1, step 2, step 3, but really to visualize what's going to happen from a journal entry standpoint and what those journal entries do to the accounts. It's really the posting of these journal entries that helps us to visualize the board, because that's really us seeing the pieces move. That's us seeing the end effect. That's us being able to say, in this case, here's where our starting point is. Here's our beginning balances. Our ending balance we already know should be 0. How are we going to get there? What are the steps to get there? And actually going through the steps through the posting. If we were to eliminate this trial balance and just have these floating journal entries and say this is step 1, step 2, or just have this floating table, without the actual trial balance, it's very difficult to see the connection. As we post more to the trial balance, this becomes more automatic in our head. We could just visualize the trial balance. We can visualize the calculation of the net income, and we can visualize the effect that will be the result of us entering the journal entries. A problem such as this is very difficult to go through on a whiteboard. We just don't have the space, and many instructors don't have the handwriting to be able to write cleanly enough to put something like this on a whiteboard and go through the full problem in that format. So we have to use something like a table or something like just floating journal entries that don't really connect to anything. But if we break something like this out in a piece-by-piece format in something like an Excel spreadsheet rather than a database, then notice how transparent this is. It's very transparent. We can see exactly what is happening. And if we break this down from one step to one step, then it's only one small piece at a time, just like a small problem. However, all those pieces being put together in a systematic way also gives us the big picture once we get to the end of it, and we can go back and see all the connections rather than us kind of looking at one little piece at a time without being able to see how it connects to everything else. Here's just another example of this. This is going to be a payroll problem. A payroll problem is another more complicated type of journal entry because of all the withholdings that happen within the payroll problem. Typically, when we have payroll, we see it in a couple different formats. When you go to the payroll accounting, we'll see it in terms of a table, which is often what will be written on the board. We'll say, hey, here's the gross pay. Here's what came out of the gross pay. So here's the total earnings. Here's what we took from the total earnings, and then here's finally the net check, the net payment. So that's typically what we'll see in terms of a payroll class to calculate the net pay. From an accounting standpoint, we also want to say, hey, well, what's that going to look like on a journal entry? This is a big mess in terms of a table. What's it going to look like with a journal entry format? And so we'd also want to see it. How would I record that from the standpoint of a journal entry? What would be the effect on the trial balance? So oftentimes then we'll see the 2 journal entries related to it, which will look something like this. And if someone is not familiar with payroll and we just put a journal entry such as this on the board and we don't post it to a trial balance, especially given the fact that we have these new accounts related to payroll, it's going to be very difficult to tie over. It's going to be kind of a mess to go from here to the actual accounts. What's going to happen on the financial statements? Notice that longer problems will actually be easier. Longer problems that are formatted in a step-by-step process to do one small piece at a time will actually be easier because we will have the cheat sheet. If we were to shortcut this problem, the same thing would happen. we would probably end up eliminating the full trial balance, which is really the visualization that we need to visualize. This is what we want to see, the end result. What will it be? What will be the effect on the trial balance? And we'll then end up with just kind of a floating journal entry, or we'll eliminate the journal entry altogether and we'll just have basically a table, and we won't have the journal entry, and you'll just basically have to kind of visualize the journal entry or think about how would we convert something from a table to a journal entry. What you really want is a step-by-step process through the whole thing, noting the end result, which is really the financial statements, so that the trial balance is going to be what we create this financial statement with. We want to have the trial balance there as much as possible. Then break this something like this down into a piece-by-piece component and always be able to visualize, hey, this is our beginning point on the trial balance. This is what we're going to do. Where do we want to end up? What's going to be the effect as we enter these journal entries and then post them. And the process of posting is really where we get that visualization of, once again, moving on the board. We do have accounting resources that do focus on having a trial balance as much as possible and working with Excel transparent spreadsheets that are pre-formatted that you can use to basically set up and picture and visualize what will be the effect on the trial balance. That's one of the things that we try to do in each of the major financial accounting courses, is provide those Excel worksheets, and within those Excel worksheets go through a step-by-step process with longer problems, but that are cut down into very short step-by-step steps to get to the completion of that process, and always give you that trial balance so that you can post to the trial balance and then see what the end result will be. That's going to be one of the things that are often lacking, especially in smaller problems, even in larger problems in textbooks, is really that posting process, the end result, the visualization of what's going to happen to that end result, the trial balance, the financial statements.